and welcome to my little bookish corner of the internet. My name is Harriet. Today, as we're coming to the end of the year, I thought it'd be good to basically do a list of all of the best and most surprising books that I've read this year. 2021 was the year that I started my BookTube channel and started my Bookstagram account as well, so I was definitely reading a lot more than what I have in previous years, which means I got to try loads of different genres, loads of different authors, so I definitely want to do a little roundup of the books that I liked the most this year. Now, I did not mean to put 10 books on this list, I was just doing it randomly, but there does so happen to be 10 books exactly, so it won't be in any order. Please don't make me do that, it'll be too difficult. But I definitely want to talk about all of them, discuss the plot with you and discuss the things that I liked the most about them. So yeah, let's get started. So really the first thing that I read in this year was actually a continuation of a series that I started at the end of 2020, and that is the Earthsea series by Ursula Le Guin. Now this is a fantasy series following a young man called Ged and what happens when he realises that he can harness magic so he can use his powers, and what happens when he goes on these various adventures, things that happen throughout his life. It follows him from when he's a young boy all the way up to when he's a very old man. And this is absolutely my favourite book of all time, my favourite series of all time. I think Ursula Le Guin's writing is incredible. She's now my favourite author, and I wouldn't have discovered her if I hadn't watched a video that was basically recommending books that were similar to Harry Potter. So that's where I found this. I have got a review for Wisdom Earthsea, and I've got a very old and probably very bad review for the Earthsea series as well that I did when I first started my channel. So I'll leave those two linked down below so you can check them out. But yeah, this series just means so much to me, and I did actually reread the first book recently. I'm going to be continuing on with the series as well as a reread. And kind of on the same note, because it's similar but a little bit different, it's cheating a bit, I'm classing it as one, but the Annals of the Western Shore trilogy that I've also done a review for, again, I'll leave it down below. That has a similar vibe in that we're following two characters and they have these things called gifts, and basically they will do or say a thing and they have a power that's kind of passed through generations. This is something that I want to reread because I don't remember too much from it, but I remember that being really fantastical, really interesting as well. So yeah, that was kind of my stepping stone into Le Guin, and now I've read quite a few of her books and I'm going to continue reading all of her works as well until I've literally read everything by her because I think she's amazing. So yeah, that, to be honest, if I had to pick a top read of the year, it probably would be the Earthsea series. But yeah, it's just really stuck with me, something that I really love and something that I'm going to recommend to absolutely everyone. So I'm sorry if you get sick of me bringing it up, but it truly is my favourite thing ever. And sticking to fantasy series, I also read the Lord of the Rings trilogy this year, which I never read before, and I'd always wanted to read it, but it's quite big and quite intimidating. A lot of people say that it's quite heavy with the lore and the world building, which I do definitely agree with. It's quite intense, but I think I had kind of prepared myself for that, and it was during lockdown as well, so I had plenty of time to read it. And I thought it was amazing. I thought the characters were really lovely. The writing style itself is very beautiful. If somehow you don't know what the Lord of the Rings trilogy is about, we are following various different kind of races of magical creatures. So you've got things like orcs in there, you've got hobbits, wizards, elves, so there's a little bit of everything in there. And we are following a hobbit called Frodo and his friend Sam as they're sent on a mission by the wizard Gandalf to take this ring of power and destroy it for fear that the Dark One will take it and come back to power. So that's kind of a very brief overview of the story, but it was just fantastic. It was such an adventure. This is a series that I do want to reread at some point as well. There's so much to take in that I don't think that one time reading it is enough. So I'm excited to get to it again at some point, maybe next year or the year after. But I really loved it and had an absolutely wonderful time with it. Another book that I really enjoyed and that actually really surprised me was The Travelling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arakawa. This is a book that I wanted to read for a while, honestly just because I picked it up for the front cover in a charity shop for maybe 50p or £1. It's been a while since it's been on my shelves. And I've actually lent this book out to someone now as well, and I'm really hoping that they're going to enjoy it. But I was surprised. Now I have read books about cats that are by Japanese authors before, and I did really enjoy them, but I didn't realise that this was going to hit me so hard. So we are following this book pretty much from the perspective of a cat, and then we do get the perspective of a couple of our main characters as well. And the owner of this cat is, for some reason that we don't know, having to sell the cat or pass it on to a family member or a friend, and they're not talking about why, and you obviously find out why at the end of the book, and it is heartbreaking. This whole book is so sad and so emotional, and there's a lot in there about power of friendship and love, and if you love cats or you just love animals in general, I feel like this is going to really resonate with you. and it just is so emotional but so beautiful at the same time. This again is one of those books that I want to reread, and I think that it's something that almost everyone can read. It does deal with grief and loss, so that's something to keep in mind in case you don't like reading things like that, but I think that it's really special and really magical, and I'm so happy that I tried it. And since then I have read a couple of similar books, things like The Guest Cat, and I've got another one on my shelf called If Cats Disappeared from the World that I do want to get to too. So it kind of was my stepping stone into Japanese literature, and now I'm very heavily involved in that, and it's something that I really enjoy. Another book that has got a cat in it is Kiki's Delivery Service by Iko Kodono. This is a very whimsical and magical children's story that was turned into a Studio Ghibli film, so if you do want to check out the film, I highly recommend it. It's very fun, it's very easy to watch. But we are following a young witch called Kiki, and in this little universe that has been created, witches, when they are 13, I believe, have to go to a city and look after it for a year and kind of be their resident witch, but a lot of people don't understand the magic and so are scared of witches. So it's her adventures and how she gains the love of the people and the trust of the people as well. This again deals a lot with friendship and trust, which is something that I really like reading about. I do like books that have good morals in there. I just think it's really nice to read. And yeah, it did surprise me. I didn't think I was going to love it as much as I did. This is one of those books that I thought I would like it, but I didn't expect it to be just as good and just as fun. This is again another book that I have lent out to someone and hopefully they enjoy reading it. The next book is something that quite a few people haven't heard of, so I definitely want to give this author a voice and share his works quite a lot because the series is amazing. It's not finished yet, but I've had a wonderful time with it, and it is by a smaller author. I think it's really important to support smaller authors and their works, especially when it's something as good as this. So that is The Pillars of Peace trilogy by Tom Dunbarrow. The first two books are out, the third one isn't out yet, but I believe it is in the editing stage, I'm not sure. But yeah, the two books that I've read, you've got The Look of the King and No Place for Peace. No Place for Peace was the most recent one that's come out, I think it was in October time. And this series follows a young man called Cyrus and his journey into discovering who he really is, the characters that he meets along the way. There's a lot of political intrigue in here, so much action in the second book. I was blown away at how action-packed it was. I wasn't expecting it to be like that because the first one is kind of a lot more build-up, but there's still some action scenes in there as well. It deals with war, it deals with military issues, family issues, identity, and it's just a really lovely read. I think it would be appropriate for young adult as well as adult, and it was just super fun, and I'm really excited for the third book to come out. They're quite short books, but they, again, are jam-packed with everything that you could want. Now, I have obviously mentioned the Earthsea series and the Annals of the Western Shore series. I did want to mention kind of a almost standalone book by Le Guin, but it is set in a universe. You don't need to read the books in order, but it's part of the Hainish cycle, which is kind of like her sci-fi, science-heavy series. But to be honest, it's not too science-heavy. I'm not very good with sci-fi, and I found all of these books in this cycle very interesting. But the main one I want to bring up is my favourite so far, which is The Lathe of Heaven. I didn't know what to expect from this. I thought it was going to be kind of hard to read. It was one of the first in the Hainish cycle that I'd read, but it was super easy to read, and I know that they did make a film out of it. I haven't actually seen it yet, unfortunately, but I believe it's available on YouTube to check out. But this is a very interesting book and something that I definitely want to reread. So following our main character and everything that he dreams comes to be. And just the logistics behind how that works was very interesting. We have kind of a villain character who is very believable as being evil. I know some people are just evil in general, but this guy seems to have kind of a purpose and a reason behind why he is evil. So he essentially wants to harness that power and kind of take it for himself and change the history of things to suit him. And yeah, it's just a very interesting read. The character development is really good. The world building is excellent. The things that this guy dreams, when they come to life, are just absolutely loopy and crazy, but so interesting and so much fun, and it's quite a short read too. And out of all the books by Le Guin, I think this is the one that most people will get on with because it is sci-fi and it's kind of fantasy, but it's not too heavy in either direction, so I think it would be good for someone who doesn't know what the first Le Guin book they should read should be. I think it should be this one. Another book that really surprised me, mainly because of how short it is yet how impactful it was, is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El Motar and Max Gladstone. This story follows two characters named Red and Blue and their correspondence with each other when they are floating between different timelines. It's again quite science heavy. This is a sci-fi novel, but it's not something that you need to know a lot of science to read. It's quite easy and does focus more on the characters more than anything. It was kind of confusing at times, but when you get to the end of the novel, it all makes sense anyway. But this is a really beautiful story about the power of friendship, and it's kind of like a romance at the same time. It was just very interesting, and again, the world building is crazy for such a short book. It really was fascinating, and I liked how they were kind of jumping between timelines and still communicating with each other, and the ways that they communicate with each other was very interesting as well. This is something I want to reread because I feel like there was a lot more about the lore of the timelines that I didn't really pick up on because I was focused more on the story more than anything. So yeah, this will be something I want to reread and see if I get anything more out of it. But what I got out of it so far was amazing. I thought it was really good. Another book would be Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. I have sung praises about this book before, but after it being compared to 1984, which I didn't really get on with, I was a bit nervous to read this, but I shouldn't have been because it's so much easier to read, so much more interesting in my opinion. So this is set in a dystopian society where the people there are given drugs to basically keep them almost numb to everything and to keep them happy. So it's called Soma. And yeah, it just keeps them happy. They have these big orgies to kind of get rid of their sexual needs, but they don't get pregnant. They grow babies in test tubes and things like that to make an idealistic society that is definitely focused heavily in on classes. It definitely has a class system, and there's kind of different layers to the people that are there, and they're all made just for this system and the society. And then on the outskirts of that, you have kind of regular human society, and they're seen as savages. And it's what happens when one of our main characters goes to the savage lands and meets these people and how it affects them, how it changes them. And this book was surprisingly very graphic and very violent. But I think, again, this is something where I really enjoyed the lore and the science behind everything. The way the society is described is so scary, and there are certain things that are very similar to our current day society, which is what freaked me out the most, I think. Definitely if you're going through a bit of a crisis, this wouldn't be the one to pick up, but I do think that it is very interesting. Again, one of those books I want to reread to see what else I can get out of it, but I thought it was incredible and very accessible as well. Personally for me, 1984 by George Orwell, there were times when I felt like I wasn't really understanding what was going on, or there were certain parts that to me were very boring, very slow. I do understand why the book is as popular as it is, but for me it just didn't hit the mark, whereas this one did. Also, if you think that you don't want to read this because you've already read 1984, they are completely different in my opinion. I think that you should read this anyway. And then the last two books on this little list are actually children's novels. So we'll start with the one that I read first, which is A Pinch of Magic by Michelle Harrison. This is part of a trilogy called the Pinch of Magic Trilogy, and throughout this we are following three sisters, and they are stuck under a family curse that basically means they cannot leave the island that they live on. And it's about them trying to find out why this curse came about and how to break it so that they can leave, escape and be free. One of the main characters in particular is very adventurous, and obviously she can't leave her hometown, so she's feeling very trapped, and she's got a lot of kind of pent up emotions about that. But yeah, it was a very whimsical, very magical read. I think that this would make a really good film actually, whether it's like an animation or a live action. I think it would be really good to watch as film. I haven't read the final two books in this trilogy yet, but they are on my shelves and I will be starting them in the new year, which is very exciting. But yeah, these books are just very easy to read, but also are very creative. I am definitely one for world building, and I think the world building in this, particularly for a children's novel, was really, really good. Which leads me into the final book, which again, world building, creativity, magic, is everything I want. And that is The Christmas Pig by J.K. Rowling. I don't know what I was expecting from this book, but it certainly wasn't what I got, and I am so happy with it. This just completely surprised me. There's no other word for it, but we are following a young boy called Jack, and he loses his favourite cuddly toy who's been with him since as far back as he can remember. He calls him Der Pig because he was named when Jack couldn't actually say the properly, so he said Der instead. So his name is Der Pig, or DP for short. And he gets lost in a certain way that I won't tell you because I think it will ruin the story. But he goes on a mission to try and find his favourite cuddly toy, and he ends up going to a place called the Land of the Lost, which is this magical realm where things go when they are lost. This isn't just physical objects, it does actually include things like emotion. So for example, there is a character called Power who obviously is quite tyrannical, and we get to hear a little bit about his backstory and how he got lost as well, which is really cool. But yeah, all of these characters in this magical world have such believable yet crazy stories, and it was just very fun and very entertaining. It's such an easy read. If I had a child, I would definitely want to read this to them. I feel like they'd love it as much as I did. There is absolutely no denying that J.K. Rowling is a really good children's author. I've not personally read any of her adult books and I'm not sure if I will. But yeah, this was super fun. If you like films like Inside Out, this actually gave me similar vibes to that, and Soul as well, just in the fact that there is this completely different place that has, I don't know, like animated versions of things that you wouldn't expect to be animated, so like physical objects, emotions, things like that. So it did remind me of that, but it is its kind of own thing. And I think that it dealt really well with things like bullying, things like honesty, family. Yeah, I just had a lovely time with it, and I definitely recommend it for Christmas because it is very festive. So those are 10 books that I absolutely loved this year. They are definitely my favourites. I went through all 87 books that I've read so far. If that changes before this video goes up, I'll put a note down here. But yeah, I've read 87 books so far, which is really good. I'm hoping I can get to at least 90 before the year is up. I don't think I'll be able to hit 100 unless, well, I don't know how I'd do that. I'd have to just read like loads of poems and individually put it on my Goodreads, which I'm not going to do. But yeah, it would have been nice to reach 100, but it's really cool that I read 90 books in a year. I've never done that before. I think the most I've ever read is like 6. But yeah, let me know down below if you've read any of these and what you thought, or let me know your favourite or some of your favourite books from the year. Let me know how many books you read this year. But that is it from me today. There will be a video up very soon, my worst or most disappointing books of 2021, so I'll see you in that video. Bye!